On this edition of Independent Sources, immigrants on the offensive. Resistance to President Trump's incendiary policies escalates. And the immigrant elderly. How is this sometimes overlooked portion of the population ready to have a role in this resistance?
Independent Sources, your window to the city's ethnic and immigrant communities. Here's your host, Gary Pierre.
First came the executive order to build a wall on the U.S. border with Mexico and to nearly half the number of refugees allowed into this country. Then came another order to block immigrants from 7 countries around the world with majority Muslim populations. All this within the first few days of Donald Trump's presidency. Mr. Trump and his team are not apologetic about this all-out offensive on immigrants despite criticism from some Republicans like Senators John McCain and Lindsey Graham. The real resistance is coming from immigration advocates and their allies, 30,000 of whom recently gathered in New York to protest the president. With me in studio to talk some more about the president's policies and the response going forward are Francis Mahdi, the Senior Regional Outreach Associate at the New York Immigration Coalition, and freelance journalist Nida Khan. Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Nida, I want to start with you, because just last week you were on this show and we talked about what is the worst we can expect from Trump. You kind of punted on that question.
Right.
A week later, I posed the same question to you. Is this the worst?
I know, and I did, and I punted on it very strategically because we don't know, right? And this is just, like you just mentioned in the intro, it's just the first week. And you saw this executive order go into effect on Friday, and we have no idea what's going to happen after this. And I keep saying that this is basically his and his administration, their test run, right? They want to see how the American public is going to react to this. How much are they going to push back? And thankfully, they've been pushing back, extensively with these protests, with attorneys, sitting on the floor of airports, filing briefs, the ACLU going to court. I mean, that's been tremendous. But I really think he is trying to see how far he can go and how much outcry there's going to be. And this is just the beginning. And if you listen very carefully to people who work with him, like Kellyanne Conway and even Reince Priebus, they have made statements like, we can add other countries to this list as well. And is this that slippery slope that I talked about last week too, where it leads to an all-out ban on Muslims, which is what he did say on the campaign trail initially, and then will it also lead to Muslim registries? So it's very scary. I don't even like to think about a worst-case scenario. I like to stay positive. But, reality is also very, very frightening.
Well, if one thing, Francis, I think President Trump and his administration were surprised by the swift reaction of organizations and people like yourselves. So tell us what was done yesterday, on Sunday, regarding providing attorneys and legal experts to these people who were detained.
Yeah, so just to back us up a little bit, what happened on Friday evening was that everybody was confused because the president released these 2 executive orders and finally telling the whole country that certain folks coming from these 7 countries were going to be banned, and everyone went into a frenzy because we didn't know what was going to happen. By the time Saturday morning came in, we had hundreds of people that were being detained across the country. And so some of the lawyers at the New York Immigration Coalition actually went into the airport. They didn't even know what was happening there. They just said, let's just go and find out, and we'll see what information we can gather. And then it just turned into this whole team of pro bono lawyers that were coming from all over the city, writing habeas for every single person that was detained, and having Congress members come and talk to Border Patrol, trying to get some answers as to why they were being detained. I think that ultimately what happened, and thanks to the Brooklyn the Brooklyn decision by Judge Donnelly, what she basically said was that if the U.S. has no reason to hold these folks, then they should not be detained for any reason whatsoever. And so that's what everyone around the country is currently using. However, we still don't know what's going to happen because the president can once again, as you also mentioned, act upon and use even more, exercise his power even more. He could
but hold on one second, because I think while it's true he has a power, but I think people's reaction, people's resistance to it should be sending them pause. I mean, Nida, you mentioned earlier that this was a trial run. Well, if this was a trial run, was it a trial run for the opposition, which is the people right now as well.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that, like I was just saying, I'm glad that they were. And remember, this was like spontaneous. Like you said, like everybody found out Friday night. And within a couple hours, people mobilized on Saturday and across the country. I mean, we saw people from all different backgrounds. Like it wasn't just Muslims protesting. And I think that was the most beautiful part where they came out and said, this is what America really is. We're a diverse coalition. This is what makes us great. And when you attack one segment, we're all going to stand up and say no. So I think it was great for them to see the power that they have in their hands as well, where they were able to get the stay from the federal judge. But, legally, we still have to see what's going to happen, because even with the stay, like that's just stopping these folks from being deported. But as far as I know, you can speak to it more, but as far as what I read from it, that immigrants from those 7 countries still are not allowed in, and for that 4-month period right now.
Yeah, so there's currently 2 decisions, one in Boston and one in Brooklyn, the one that we just spoke about, that have set a precedent that anyone, regardless of their status, as long as they have permission to enter the U.S., should not be stopped. The only thing that we have heard from the Trump administration is that only legal permanent residents are allowed in the country, when everyone else is still going under extreme vetting. So we're hoping that through these 2 decisions, we can still get everyone out of the system, but we don't know what's going to happen.
Do you think neither that the Trump administration, sort of like the same way that we underestimate his rise to the presidency, that he's underestimate the people's rise against his presidency?
Yes and no. I think he absolutely did. I don't think he expected this amount of pushback. I'm sure he expected, some pushback. But I think he also wanted to create this disorder, because he sort of thrives on it.
I take offense to that. I mean, I see it personally. I mean, I see it more as a really undisciplined, really incompetent team. Mm-hmm. Because when he passed that order, when he signed that executive order, his own Homeland Security folks didn't know what was in it to make decisions.
Right,
so
right. It was right. They didn't go through the proper channels themselves. They pushed this on their own.
Yeah.
But I think in that chaos, he kind of like puts himself as like, oh well, I'm the savior, and I'm going to rescue us from this calamity we're going through, and I'm going to implement X, Y, and Z. And it's part of that whole facade. And you remember, I keep saying this, he's a reality TV star. So it's not necessarily what he actually stands for, what he does. It's more the illusion of what he does. And I think that feeds into that narrative. That's what I meant by that.
So now, moving forward, what are the recourses that immigrants, or even legal ones, have in this country? I mean, are people on edge right now? I mean, immigrants?
Yes, everybody is on edge. And one example of that was the 30,000 people that we saw a couple of days ago outside of Battery Park. People are not taking a no for an answer. Mm-hmm. I feel like this is an opportunity for us as leaders and organizations to take that energy and channel it into actual organizing. That we have to look at the way the Tea Party, for example, organized itself back in the day when Obama was still president, and how they got Congress to actually listen to them. We have to do the same thing, because that's how we're going to build our resistance.
How do we do that, Nida?
Well, like she said, it's actually getting on the ground, mobilizing these people. So like, for instance, when these protests are happening, there needs to be somebody going around taking information, email addresses, and having that database, and then going in the communities and getting people to, because it's not only registering to vote, it's actually getting people elected into office that represent your interests. So it's finding that new talent on the local level too, because that is so integral, and that's what the Tea Party did, and that's what Republicans, and I want to say the right wing, has done so effectively these last couple of years, and that's what the progressive side needs to do as well. So
in addition to that, I wanted to say the intersectionality. We need to start working with more movements. And you can totally see that. I know this was mentioned earlier, that we need to start figuring out what is it that's affecting the Muslim community, the immigrant community, the LGBTQ community. How can we work together to build a resistance?
Absolutely, because it's, right now, today, it's the Muslim community, but tomorrow it's another one. And I think that's what people realize, and they're starting to galvanize and fight against it, which is beautiful, which is good.
Okay. We're due for our first break right now. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Thanks for staying tuned to our conversation about the response to President Trump's incendiary immigration legislation. Francis, I want to start with you on this question, is that Trump and his Republican allies control both the Senate and Congress. So why is he rushing these executive orders, particularly this one that was applied so last minute that nobody in the government knew what was happening? If he wants lasting changes, real changes, shouldn't he work with his own Republican allies in Congress and get this through?
Yeah, I think that what President Trump is doing is setting a precedent. He's setting a tone for what type of presidency he will have. And in addition to that, he's trying to, in a way, tell those who voted for him, look, I listened to you, I'm keeping my promises, and this is how I'm keeping them. And we've seen many examples of this because, for example, the DACA program, the For Action for Childhood Arrivals. I've heard him say in one interview, we're gonna do everything in our power to treat these young people and do the right thing. And then the next time he says, we're gonna deport everyone. And so it's like, well, who are you trying to please? I think he's just really trying to cater to that particular crowd that voted for him. And then let's see what happens. And we're seeing the results now. We're seeing what's happening when you are actually making decisions that are not being consulted with anyone around you, and you're not even working with your own party.
And Obama was criticized for issuing executive orders, but he had a recalcitrant, even hostile Congress. And so here, this is supposed to be his honeymoon. So why?
Exactly. No, and I think she articulated it perfectly, because if you look at the actual issue of even like immigration reform, none of this stuff is actually doing anything to combat it or to reform the system. And, you know, they put out this stuff and act like, you know, people are just pouring over the border. Like it's easy to just walk up and be like, let me in. Thanks for opening the door. Like if you look at the Syrian refugees, it's an 18 to 24 month period to get vetted, to be allowed in. So it's not like something where they can just come on over and that's it. And this is, you know, they act like that they're doing this big pushback and fighting against it, but really you're not doing anything to even tackle the issue. It's just, once again, putting the facade, like feeding to his supporters and his base, like, oh, I'm living up to my promises and I'm doing what I said I would do.
Do people really understand the breadth of what this executive order is about and the dangers that that we face as a country?
I think that half of the country understands the dangers of these type of executive orders.
I think more than half.
More than half. I think it's very yeah, you're right. I think it's very dangerous because we are coming to the point where we're having a leader that's actually focusing on keeping the country divided as opposed to bringing it together, and that's a perfect example of a populist. And those are dangerous waters that we need to tread very lightly.
Last week, again, we talked about the sustainability of these protests. This time it was totally different type of protest. Is, in many ways, Trump riling the country while he's trying to divide it?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think people, you know, people are not stupid. Society might be dumbed down sometimes in terms of information. But if you do your own research and you educate yourselves, you know, people are not stupid, and they see what's going on and they see the inherent dangers of this, and they see how stuff like this has been done elsewhere in the world, things that have been done in our own country in the past, and they see, you know, those warning signs, and they want to stop this from happening. You know, I just wish that we were able to do more beforehand. You know, the fact that Trump was able to capitalize on this, on like the rising Islamophobia and the sentiments that were out there, like that also speaks volumes about where we are in society in terms of dehumanizing Muslims. And he picked up on it and ran with it and wanted, you know, got into office, and now he's turning around and allegedly doing, you know, what he said he was going to do. But hopefully, you know, with most of the country, I like to say most of the country, trying to push back against this, they will be able to stop some measures. We'll see. I don't know. It's going to be an interesting push and pull.
But is most of the country really against Trump? Because I have a feeling that a lot of people do support this whole assault on immigrants. Do you agree or disagree, Frances?
I do think that it sounds like a lot, like most of this country might be against us, but I've actually, if anything can prove that that's not true, it's what happened this weekend. I mean, just having folks around the country come together, within hours, as you mentioned, against this particular executive order really shows that there is an active resistance in the country. And you're not going to see everyone in the streets, but there is a lot going on online. And even when you go to his Twitter profile and you see his own supporters tweeting at him and saying, you need to stop this, you need to start acting like a real president, you need to be more conscious about the people who are being affected by these executive actions, or folks that are being affected by the fact that ACA will be dismantled, the Affordable Care Act. And so that's a huge deal, because this is a president that was just inaugurated less than 2 weeks ago, and we're already hearing so much backlash against him.
But so from your perch, what are you guys' plan of action moving forward? I mean, you guys you and many other organizations were providing legal help to immigrants or refugees coming in. So now what, at the neighborhood level, what's the plan?
Right now, we're going to keep the momentum. We have set the tone for what's going to happen moving forward. We are not taking any no's for an answer. We have all of our Congress members and our senators on our side. They know that people are really upset, and they need to step it up in Congress too and lead the resistance. We have not been seeing that yet. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on. And on the ground, obviously, people are very scared in the immigrant community, in the Muslim community, in the refugee community. So we're going to make sure that we're putting all of the information out there, all of the resources and the lawyers needed to provide the services for people to feel safe in this country.
So Nida, can we count on the Democratic Party to play a significant role in this so-called resistance?
Did you see our expressions? I mean, on the one hand, it was great that, you had certain politicians that went to the protest even yesterday, over the weekend, and came out and spoke in support of the Muslim community.
By the way, let me hold you up right now, because I need to share this information with you. President Obama just came out and made a statement that he supports the resistance, that he urged people to continue the protest. I would like for you to comment on
Fantastic.
that.
And I'm not surprised. I'm honestly surprised that it took this long, because...
Well, he had to have some vacation.
Well, right.
After 8 years.
He was in Hawaii, but, because we all know he's not going to go away. He plans on still being very active. He even said that himself, and he's staying in D.C., the family's staying in D.C., so I'm glad he came out with the statement. And it's great to have, statements of solidarity, but we need to see action. And I think the proof is going to be in the pudding. Like, are they actually going to stand up and do something?
If that were to happen, that would be the first time an ex-president is actively protesting his successor. I mean, that's never been done before in modern history.
Right, in modern history, yeah.
Well, there's a lot of things that are being first-timers in this presidency.
Remember,
so
it's an unprecedented election, unprecedented...
So I'm not going to be surprised if that happens.
Yeah.
And what again, going back to the questions, what can be done besides taking to the streets?
Well, I think what, she just said what they plan on doing on the ground in the community too, because that's an important point. Like, there's actual repercussions for this stuff. Like, we saw, I think it was within a couple hours when he signed the executive order, a mosque in Texas was burned to the ground. Then you had, we may not know what the motive is for the shooting in Quebec, but
there was a shooting in a mosque.
Right, and there were 6 people who died, and I believe 8 who were injured. And and I believe the FBI, when they came out with their statistics in November, it was something like a 67% increase in hate crimes against the Muslim community. And this is not only here. Like, I wrote a piece in Huffington Post last week about the global context of this, because when you go to Europe, you see the same rise in Islamophobia, anti-immigrant happening in many countries, and you have that same push and pull where you have a rise in nationalism and you have a rise in these right-wing extremist candidates who are feeding into that. And I believe last time I checked, like, Le Pen in France was ahead. And, it's not like they're just running, they're actually winning and leading polls and may actually get into office. And then you have people who are like us, who are in the intersectionality and trying to fight back against this. So it's going to be really, really fascinating to see which way this goes everywhere, not just here.
Unfortunately, we're out of time.
Thank you.
Thanks to my guests, freelance journalist Nida Khan and Francis Mahdi, Senior Regional Outreach Associate at the New York Immigration Coalition. Still to come on the show, immigrant elders and the impact they can have on resisting President Trump's policies. Welcome back. Many of the faces we've seen during the resistance to President Trump's policies have been those of the young. But there are many immigrant elders who are poised to make an impact. Here in studio to discuss how this growing but sometimes overlooked population can play a role in this movement are Bobby Sackman, the Associate Executive Director of Public Policy at Live On New York, and Mohammed Razvi, the Executive Director of the Council of People's Organization. Welcome.
Thank you.
So here we are discussing what we all thought was the impossible and the role that immigrant communities are playing in this resistance. So what are the elderly playing and what is the potential role that they can play in this situation?
So one of the most important things is we have to understand these elders that are now elders in New York, they were the immigrants who came to live that American dream. And all of them, they thought they were going to stay here, live a dream, and move forward. However, now...
Moving forward, you mean going back to where they...
Going back to where they came from, and perhaps, and that would be good. But they ended up staying here, working hard, and supporting their loved ones, and bringing their loved ones here. But the unfortunate part is now they are so worried, because what's going to happen? What's going to happen to my kids? What's going to happen to my grandchildren? What are these things that are going on? I mean, that's what's worrying all the seniors now.
Well, Bobby, can you attempt to answer those questions that Mohammed just raised?
The senior centers that are around the city and other community-based services for the elderly in general are terrific networks of places for people to go and gather. And so already senior centers around the city serve thousands of immigrants, Muslim immigrants, as well as people from Korea and China and Mexico and other parts of Latin America, the Caribbean. And it's a place that they feel safe, and that's really important. There's staff that literally speaks their language, but they do feel safe and respected. And so I think it's very important that as the city moves forward and the state, in whatever policies they implement in terms of the president's executive orders and other things to come, that they don't forget this network of services, that they go to the senior centers, that they go even to programs for people that are homebound who can't get out of the house, like Meals on Wheels, for example. And they communicate not only what's going on to the seniors themselves, but use them as a way to get to the families, that they are communicators. These are the grandparents, and they can carry the message and the information. And also, importantly, though, to pay attention to what is it, as you're saying, what is it that, from the viewpoint of being elderly, what am I afraid of now for myself and my family, and not to overlook that this is a very important piece.
Right.
And I think seniors have also, given the chance, will speak out. They just need to have the platform to do it.
Now, Mohammed, you've been in touch with some people who are stranded who can't be reunited with their families. What are they feeling right now?
So the most important thing is it's not just getting back here, but it's also, are they going to be able to get back to normalizing with their lives? Because the effects that happen, especially when they're traveling with kids, it's devastating for them. If a family member, he's bringing his kid, or, like one person, he just called me right from out of the country. He goes, can I travel? I'm coming on February 7th with my kids.
From where?
From Pakistan. Now he's worried.
Well, Pakistan is not on the list of countries
he's feeling that everything is going to start to change. And he's so worried about it. I said, no, this is okay. Just make sure you have your green card, make sure you have your passport, and you can come in. Don't worry. But it's happening with other community groups who are on the list. On Sunday, we just held a huge event with our wonderful Congresswoman, Yvette Clarke, which represents Brooklyn and Flatbush area with us. And we were expecting 100 people. All of a sudden, there was over 500 people. And many people who are affected from Yemeni, from Sudan, and from Somalia, they came in, and other community members who are affected, and they were explaining to us what the hardship that they were going through. Their family members were at the airports being detained. But coming back, as Bobby's saying, the senior centers. And COPO, we are the first halal senior center in Brooklyn. We were fortunate enough because our mayor and our commissioner of DFTA, Department of the Aging, Ms. Corrado, was able to do the inauguration and ribbon cutting of the first halal senior center in Brooklyn. I mean, it's starting to help the communities of these particular, religion.
Bobby, I wanted to ask you, one of the things that caught my attention was the different faces in these protests we've seen across the country. And why do you think is motivating people? And also the second part of the question is that the elderly, now we don't expect too many of them to take to the streets, but what can they do to lend their voices to this protest movement?
Well, I think the outpouring is because people are shocked, appalled, and scared. I think, hey, I'm 68 years old. I have been to 2 rallies, a vigil. I did the Women's March. So there are older women, there are older people out there. I think what may be harder, maybe out of fear and, is for some communities, for folks to get out to these rallies. Maybe it's not something they're comfortable and used to doing either.
We haven't been taken to the streets in large numbers
Yeah.
since the 60s here.
Well, but also if you're not originally from this country, maybe going to public rallies is not something that you think is exactly a safe thing to do. You're not comfortable doing it. I think that the way I look at helping older adults is they're not helpless, but they may need help. So if you're having a rally and you want folks in their 60s, 70s, or older there, do they need a bus to get there? Do they need a van to get there? Do they need to know there's somebody that's sort of leading them along the way, to make sure everything's okay? Just probably some very basic things that younger people might not think of because they could jump on the train and get to where they're going. But if you lend some support, explain why you're doing a rally and all, I think you'll find people, like the 500 people that stood on the street yesterday. I think you will find people.
Yeah.
What's been the most surprising dynamic for you, Mohammed, in this with your center? What is happening that really gives you some sort of like hope?
So the most important thing that's happened, and I've noticed in all the rallies and all the meetings that we have held, it's the social media network. The way it's actually, I don't know how to explain it, but because of the passion of the community that, what's going on.
So people have been able to be galvanized through social media is what you're saying?
Tremendously. I mean, for example, last night, my phone, it was live on Facebook. And just because it was live on Facebook, what it turned out, 1,000 people started to comment and viewed it. And then more people just came right into the meeting.
Okay.
And they were like, oh my God. And then similar things with the rallies, which we held with the New York Immigration Coalition, same thing. It was because of the social media. It's just like morphed into, and people are so, how can I say, they're awake and they want to, no, we need to step. And one of the key things that I'm hearing over and over, never again, never again. Because the fact of the matter is, this president had the audacity of introducing such a bill on the day of Holocaust Remembrance Day.
And Bob,
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
And then he did not even mention that the individual of the Jewish community who were the ones who were victims of this Holocaust, that they weren't part of it or something.
That's the question I was going to ask you about, Bobby. And what did you make of that?
I am Jewish. And so, and I'm lucky. My grandparents came here before World War I from Russia and Poland. Otherwise, I don't know if I would have been born. And so to leave out the Jewish population on International Holocaust Remembrance Day is simply bizarre. There's no other way to say it. To do this executive order should not be done any day. To do it that day, I think he probably just didn't even think about it. What is good is that people are coming together. And I think that's the strength of New York City, that the city united will never be defeated.
All right.
And the more we can do it intergenerationally, I think the stronger we will be as well.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. We'll have to end the conversation here. Thanks to my guests, Bobby Sackman and Mohammed Razvi. That's our show this week. Thanks for staying tuned. Till next time, be independent-minded.